Hello, friends. This is Ray here. I thought I would read to you a bit of the first chapter of my new book, The Indy 500, a year-long quest to win the greatest spectacle in racing. This is chapter 1. It's entitled Sunday, May 28th, 2023, the 107th Indianapolis 500. Joseph Newgarden sat in his race car, stopped at the south end of the pits in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The red flag had been thrown for the third time in 12 laps, pausing the 107th running of the Indianapolis 500, which has 2 laps remaining around the storied 2.5-mile racetrack. Just a few moments earlier, Newgarden had led the field out of turn 4 to resume the race after it had been paused to clean up the debris of a 5-car accident. Falling behind in his slipstream, the wake of air left behind Newgarden's leading car. Defending champion Marcus Ericsson and third-place runner Santino Ferrucci had gotten a strong jump on him. Ericsson overtaking Newgarden on his left and Ferrucci pulling alongside him on the right. Just as Ferrucci seemed destined to relegate Newgarden to third, yellow lights illuminated along the side of the track, signaling caution and for drivers to slow down and maintain their positions. Behind the 3 leaders, another crash had occurred, sending damaged cars into each other and the concrete retaining walls surrounding the racing surface along the front stretch. Newgarden had been fortunate with the timing of the yellow flag. Ferrucci had not quite completed the overtake, allowing Newgarden to keep his second-place position on the track. However, at the time, he didn't know it. Ferrucci, thinking he had not only overtaken Newgarden, but also Ericsson, pulled next to Ericsson as they went through the short chute between turns 3 and 4 at the end of the lap, seemingly forcing the issue for the top position in the field. Ferrucci thought better of his contesting the order and ducked in behind Ericsson as they, along with the rest of the field, slowly navigated through the crash debris littering the racing surface, threading between the wrecked race cars and safety personnel on both sides. As they crossed the yard-wide strip of bricks that marks the IMS's start-finish line, only 3 laps remained in the event long billed as the greatest spectacle in racing. Almost everyone thought the race to be essentially over, with the remaining laps to be completed at the reduced speeds under the yellow flag. Race officials, however, had another idea. Nobody wants a race to end anticlimactically under caution without the drivers racing for position. That goes for any race, much less the biggest and most eagerly awaited race in the calendar, an internationally televised event that has captured the attention and imagination of people for over 100 years. On lap 198, race officials made their decision to red flag the race once again, and drivers were made aware of their in-helmet radios to come into the pits and stop their cars in the order they ran at the far south end. Getting to that position, they passed the start-finish line in the pits, signaling for the end of that lap while the beginning of the next. With the engines turned off, the cars sat on pit lane. Just 2 laps remained. Newgarden sat third in line behind both Ericsson and Ferrucci, worried that he may have lost his best opportunity to win the 500. In his 11 previous appearances in the race, the 2-time IndyCar Series champion, awarded for the best overall results over the entire season, had managed a best finish to just third, achieved in 2016. While crews attended to drivers involved in the crash, removed the battered and broken machines, and cleared the racing surface of any debris, race officials quickly looked at data, including frame-by-frame analysis of various video feeds, to determine the exact order of cars at the precise moment the caution lights illuminated. A great deal of attention focused on the chaos that erupted in the middle and tail end of the field, where the accident had occurred during the mad dash down the front straightaway. However, they also looked at the front of the field, where the video showed Ericsson clearly in front, as well as Newgarden just inches ahead of Ferrucci. Newgarden's Chevrolet-powered car was pushed up to second, ahead of Ferrucci, and behind only Ericsson for the coming restart. Oddly, it was the exact place in the queue Newgarden wanted. In this era of IndyCar racing, aerodynamics plays an enormous role in how cars perform on superspeedways like Indianapolis. Trailing cars face much less air resistance than the leader, whose car is tasked with punching a hole through the air. If the trailing car is close enough, there's a pocket of only slightly turbulent air, almost like a vacuum at over 200 miles per hour, where the driver faces much less air resistance pushing against the car. Closely following behind a car on either of the speedway's 2 5/8 of a mile long straightaways allows for a significant advantage. First, the trailing car can keep pace by using less of the throttle and therefore less fuel. More importantly, when time comes for an overtake, the driver, tucked nicely into the aerodynamic slipstream, can rapidly close the distance to the car ahead, then quickly move to either side, the edge of that slipstream momentarily wrapping around the rear of the car and essentially pushing the car forward for a critical second or two. Usually that's enough for an overtake. Of course, falling closely behind a car comes with disadvantages too. When the leading car pushes air up and out to the sides, it removes much of the airflow from the car trailing behind. On the straightaways, that's an advantage for the trailing car. However, on the speedway's 4 or quarter-mile long turns, it means less air flows over the trailing car's body, including the critical front and rear wings of the race car. Those wings are much like the wings of an airplane, but are inverted. Instead of creating lift, an Indy car's wings are designed to push the car down on the track, providing it enough grip to maneuver the 90-degree turns at speeds well over 200 miles per hour. Thus, the key for drivers is to be close enough to the leading car going through the turns, but not too close to lose the grip and traction. Ideally, the trailing car builds momentum going into either turns 2 or 4, allowing them to gain on the leading car down the long straightaways, leaving enough time and space at the end of the straight to duck out and make the overtake. It's easier said than done, particularly when the leading car isn't inclined to allow the overtake. Getting the job done requires equal parts proper car setup, driver skill, and driver experience. Newgarden sat on pit road knowing he had all three. Ericsson, just in front of him, also knew he had all three. Their experience included thousands of laps around the speedway, both in practice and Indianapolis 500 races. However, their experience did not include anything like they were about to undergo. Ordinarily, in a restart from a red flag situation, including the 2 previous restarts in this race, the race cars follow the pace car out of the pits, where they then run at least 1 yellow flag lap to allow drivers to get their tires warm. When tires are at their peak operating temperature, they afford their optimal traction, and traction equates to safety. However, when pushing race speeds on relatively cool tires, there is substantially less traction, and the element of danger rises exponentially. Because race officials waited for 1 complete lap to run under the caution before red flagging the race, only 2 laps remained. If officials were to get the green flag finish to the race they and spectators alike coveted, they would need to throw the green flag before the completion of lap 199. That's not what Ericsson wanted. If the race finished under yellow flag conditions in the position the cars held currently, he would win his 2nd consecutive Indianapolis 500, complete with an additional $420,000 in prize money from Borg Warner. Of course, the green flag finish was exactly what Newgarden and Ferrucci wanted. After a brief delay to clear the track, race officials gave the order for the teams to restart their cars. Soon after, the pace car let the field out of the pits to resume lap 199 under caution. Ericsson, being the leader, held the responsibility for dictating the start, and he went slowly through the south end, through turns 1 and 2, and onto the front stretch, the field close behind him and the pace car speeding off into the distance. Into the north end of the speedway, Ericsson picked up his pace just a bit, but not a full-on restart. For that, he waited until the entrance to turn 4, where he accelerated in earnest, with Newgarden and the pack responding in kind. Exiting turn 4 and coming down the front stretch to take the white flag, the signal of the last lap of the race, Ericsson started serpentining, weaving his car left and right, the in vogue strategy the last several years to break up the draft behind him. His weaving was not technically a violation of the rules established to prevent the often dangerous practice of blocking. In blocking, the driver in front, following the action behind him in his rearview mirrors, moves reactively to prevent the car behind from overtaking. Rules allow a driver to make 1 reactive move, leaving the trailing driver the opportunity to counter the block and make an overtaking maneuver. In Ericsson's case, as the leader, he was proactively making his moves, with Newgarden in the field reacting to the leader following his moves. In many ways, it's a case of semantics, and old-timers continued to bristle at the practice. Still, Ericsson weaved side to side, the pack following until he moved to the far right to set himself up for entering turn 1. Newgarden behind. In the battle for third, Ferrucci held off a fast-charging Alex Palou, the fastest qualifier for the race. Ericsson held the lead through turn 1, the short chute, and turn 2, but Newgarden had a tremendous run on Ericsson, quickly closing the distance between them as they went through turn 2. Exiting turn 2 and entering the backstretch, Newgarden carried much more momentum between the 2 cars. Ericsson, in a continued effort to break the slipstream, the toe in the vernacular of racers and fans, moved to his left to weave along the straightaway. Newgarden followed Ericsson to his left, then almost instantly changed his mind, as it was clear he could carry his advantage in momentum to pull alongside Ericsson and, further down the backstretch, easily pass Ericsson before entering turn 3. Ericsson on the inside was helpless to fight off Newgarden. Instead, he surrendered the lead and followed Newgarden into turn 3, where he in turn benefited from the draft in the short chute between turns 3 and 4. Now, Ericsson had the momentum advantage, closing on Newgarden through turn 4 before blasting onto the front stretch in a final dash to reach the checkered flag first. Newgarden, taking a page out of the serpentining playbook, aggressively weaved his car exiting turn 4, diving dangerously below the white line separating the racing surface and that of the pit lane entry, Ericsson hot on his tail. Ericsson kept closing on Newgarden, as Newgarden again weaved right, then back to his left. But covering a distance greater than a football field every second, Newgarden streaked over the finish line first, just 0.0974 seconds in front of Ericsson, the fourth closest finish in Indianapolis 500 history. In the end, the gap between the cars was slightly longer than the single car length. So, folks, that's maybe the first 4 or 5 pages of the Indy 500, a year-long quest to win the greatest spectacle in racing. Not quite the first full chapter. There's a couple of section breaks and that finishes. It's available May 6th at booksellers everywhere. It's also available right now at rayharchin.com. Thanks for taking a view and a listen, and I look forward to chatting with you all soon.